All right, while I was gone over the weekend, I got some fittings. So let's get this fuel system put together. Remember, I had this fuel filter on there for the old fuel system, and it has an inverted flare inlet, which I use a lot on my cars because you can take this special brake line. It's like some kind of coated steel, copper, nickel brake line, and then you can get a regular brake line. They all have the 5/8 inverted flare ends on them, and so you can use sections like this that they don't rust, or you can just use the nut. And then I buy rolls of that 3/8 and 5/16 brake line, and that is run all the way down, all the way to my fuel pump in the wheel well. And I was thinking I can cut that line so I can use the new filter underneath the clamp right there, and just put the nut or reuse that nut after I cut off the end with a tubing cutter and double flare it back here. That way the new filter will now fit underneath the clamp right there, and the lines will go right in. That 3/8 line has to go into the inlet here, and then the outlet here, I got these barbed fittings. See, originally I was going to put this on there. It's an adapter to go from inverted flare to 6AN. But once I screwed all that on to that line, and then had my double female 6-to-6 here, and then had that on there, once I put it all together, it was just too long. So it just kind of fit together like this. All right, so you can see how long that is. So even if I shortened that line and put another end on it so that this could fit under the clamp, it would be way back there by the AC expansion valve. So what I also bought off of eBay, these are EFI clamps. They don't squeeze your rubber like the regular worm clamps that came with some of my fittings on eBay. So these are all at O'Reilly's. You've got a smooth clamping all around the hose, and nothing tears into the rubber or the outside. So I bought these adapters, 6AN to 3/8 tube with a ferrule. This goes on the tube after I cut it. I'm going to cut that with a tubing cutter, shorten it up so that now this with the steel line is going to go into the filter right under that. So it shortens it a little bit, it just gets rid of this female to female. So it'll look a little bit better, and then I can shorten it up enough so now this filter is underneath that clamp behind the engine, and I can still get to it if I ever need to change it. Cutting the steel tube exactly where I need it so that this clamp is around the middle of the fuel filter regulator. Had to disconnect my heater hoses so I can get in here. And I marked about exactly where I want that fitting to bottom out on that steel tube before the ferrule crimps down on it. So let me cut this and I'll put the end on it. Cut off the end right where I need it. Now I deburred the end of the tube. Those tubing cutters leave a lot of metal and a lip inside your hole, so you've got to deburr that inside. Now I'm flushing it out with my battery set up here and my switch going to my test port on the fuel pump relay. And quite a bit of little shards came out as I was cleaning it. So Yeah, I want to make sure it's all flush before I put the new ends on the line. Keep everything out that you can. Okay, had to tap that on a little bit. Had to make sure that it's really smooth, and I greased it up because I didn't want to go on there because it's a very tight fit. So tapped it on there lightly with another fitting so I wouldn't hurt the edge. And now this has a little inset in there, so now the tube goes in like that, and then this tightens up against it. So always use a lot of lube or some silicone grease on your threads, because aluminum is so soft. And I greased a little bit of this lip on both sides because that's a steel insert and this is a steel line. So now you just have to make sure that's snugged up, because you don't want to mess with your fuel system and have a leak. So you want to make sure that's nice and tight, and the way to do that is to lube up your threads. All right, so let me get this tightened up. Okay, I've got that fitting really tight. Remember, you don't want to hurt your aluminum threads, so I greased it all up. But you want to make sure that ferrule squeezes down and collapses that tubing a little bit, so now it'll never slide back and forth or slide off. It is very tight on there. And I cranked it down pretty good, and just don't want to over muscle those threads. So that is now ready to go, and the filter is going to go. That is the supply line, so it's going to go on like that, and that's the return line. And the clamp is going to go underneath this rubber piece. I just got this from Amazon today. It's the 10-foot of PTFE hose and 4 extra fittings that I don't need, so they'll go in the scrap box. But I'll probably use this for the supply line going to the intake, because the barb hose I'm using to go from the fuel filter over to the return line. Oh, by the way, this return line is the original fuel line that used to go down to the fuel pump on the small block. And I had bent it up carefully and turned it over there because I had purchased a whole roll of the 5/16 that rust-free or non-rusting fuel line, that special formula, whatever that is. Didn't have to use it because I'm using the original fuel line. I know it'll rust, but as long as I keep flushing it through, you know, we've got original fuel lines out there working all these years that have never been replaced. But I've got a new fuel tank in the back, and I'm going to try this fuel system first. I do have a Spectra EFI fuel tank for a Challenger, which I bought for $150 before they stopped making them, before COVID. So I might put that in. It's an internal fuel pump in case this one's a little bit too loud. But I've driven this car for years with the fuel pump that's mounted up here. I've got the car jacked up on my quick jack right now. Let me turn off this fan. So this is how my fuel system is in the car from my other EFI, okay? It just has the stock sending unit that came with the new fuel tank I bought from Vans years ago at Indoor Indy. I have a regular fuel filter here as a pre-filter. Then the EFI fuel pump. And then it goes all the way, it ran a line from there all the way up, because I had a whole roll of 3/8, and then up where I show it going around the heater blower motor. So that's it. So if I need the other fuel tank, it's right here. If you ever look up this number, CR8FFI, CR8EFI, they were Challenger and Cuda fuel tanks, brand new from Spectra in Canada. They came with an internal fuel pump that went right into the stock sending unit hole, but it's got a bathtub inside. One of my other videos, I think I showed where I was turning this fuel pump around so that the stock was facing this way and down in the bathtub instead of up like this. If I have to, I have that as a spare if this pump ever goes out. This pump went out on me once before, but I've got a lifetime warranty on it from Napa, and I had to change this right on the tail of the Dragon on an incline. So if you jack it up a certain way, I can get this pump off with a full tank of gas without everything leaking out. And I was able to change it. That's what I do. I just take off this back tire. I can change the fuel pump right there. So that's an option. It's not very loud, but you do hear it a little bit. But that's what my other EFI system was using. All right, I've got it hooked up, and now I'm gonna run a return hose, that EFI hose, from this fitting to my return fitting down there. So it's shorter, but this looks a little better. It'll be hidden underneath my heater hoses. This Corvette filter regulator came with like an extra ground strap. I think they're worried that if you used rubber hose, this thing was the clamp around it was isolated, so this thing might have built up some static from the fuel flowing through it. So they give you a ground wire that I can just hook to something. So I'll probably just hook it, put an end on it, and put it underneath one of these, because it came with it. Why not use it if it's there? But it was bent this way, and I don't want it any closer to my alternator return right there. That's the alternator feed. So I want to talk about this fuel injection hose. This stuff, I bought some fuel injection hose from O'Reilly's, but it's not lined, okay? This is all from AutoZone. If you go to AutoZone and get their fuel injection hose, I've been using this for years because it comes with a plastic liner inside. And that's what'll keep the alcohol and fuel away from your rubber. So that's what you look for if you need emergency fuel hose. Go to AutoZone and buy their fuel injection hose. Here's a number on it. There's a Goodyear number on it, but it comes in a little pack. But there's its rating, and it has the plastic liner. The stuff I bought from O'Reilly's is just straight rubber, and they call it fuel injection hose. This is the PTFE Teflon hose, but this is 3/8. Oh no, this is 3/8. So I can't use that for my return. I've got to have the 5/16 fuel injection hose for my return. But this is how it's all going to be set up. I'm going to flush it again one more time. Make sure I'm checking for leaks and checking the pressure again with the little gauge I have set up. Time to trial fit the manifold. Trying to decide which fuel rails I'm going to use. See how the lines line up so I can make my hose. Sit like that. Then I'm going to have a straight hose off of here going up this way to a 90. And this is another one of those 3/8 to fuel line fittings to 6AN. So now I'm going to use that Teflon line hose I was talking about to put a 90 up here. It's going to go down and then have curve around and have a straight at this end. And that should be just right. And then remember, take off the tape. This end goes on there. Then that end goes in there. And then the cap goes on the end. Tighten it down, and then I'm going to flush it out again with my fuel pump. Alright, now that I've got the hose cut off, they want you to expand the braid a little bit. So now you can push this. They call it an olive. I call it a ferrule from plumbing. But they want you to push that in between the braid and the lining till the lining gets all the way up to this top edge, all the way around. See, they even put some teeth in there. So once your lining gets in there and sandwiched between the inside edge and that outside, they call it an olive. This is the olive, this is the turnbuckle. Okay, that's what they're calling it in these evil energy instructions. So now that I've pushed this down where I can see the plastic liners all the way up against the edge of that olive, now I can put this back in, lubricate all this up so that as this is twisting up against the threads and the braid, it's nice and oiled up. Because now this turnbuckle has to go all the way up and tighten down. It helps if you use like a vise where you can just clamp this and spin the end into it until you almost get to the lip where they're almost touching, but you don't want them touching. Alright, so let's get this tightened up with a couple wrenches. Like I said, this is called an olive. They say it's a one-time use piece. If you ever have to disassemble this, you need to replace this before you can use this end again, per the instructions. But you do what you want to do. Alright, so I needed both hands to twist this turnbuckle onto the end. I just used 2 3/4 wrenches, and I greased up the outside sheath braided section a little bit and also greased up the threads, and it was very easy to now twist these together until they almost touched. So I can yank on this hose as hard as I can, and it'll not come off now because that is squeezed in between there, and now the liner is inside. So I'm going to cut, measure, and see exactly what I need to match the other end on the regulator, and then flush it out one more time with fresh gas, and then hook it up. Alright, it's all hooked up at the filter regulator. I've got the return hose clamped down to the return line, which, like I said, is the original fuel line bent up and around. So I've got my gauge hooked up over here so I can check pressures, and I'm flushing out the lines for any bits from me working and touching and cutting the line. So get the fuel dump in. So now what I've got a plug I can put on the end of, I can put the gauge on the end of this line and plug it, just so I can verify the fuel pressure is like it was on my other engine stand. And then I can pull the manifold off, untape all the ports, bolt it down, and then hook the fuel line back up to the fuel rail without the regulator. But what I'm going to do first, since this manifold isn't bolted down yet, I am going to hook up my fuel system to it from my stand and test every one of these injectors to make sure they're not plugged and I see a good spray pattern. All right, so let's do that next. So I can still just pull this off of here. Let's hook this up here. This whole thing still comes loose. Nothing bolted yet. And I have to remove. Here I am checking my injectors to see if the pentals are clogged or dripping. Is this one dripping? Let's see. I just tested that one. Okay. I saw online a way to clean injectors years ago, and you can take a syringe, shove a gum out tube in there, it's regular gum out, and then you hold your injector on this end like this. So for some reason I couldn't get one side to click. So right now I cleaned them all out with the gum out, and I had to replace 4 of them because those are totally plugged. Because remember, this came off an engine that I had running about 5 years ago. And then I got the other one I put in the CUDA after I ran lean and blew up, you know, a couple piston tops. So here I am testing. This was what I showed in my other video, but I'm just showing it again now. It's just a battery. Right now it's using my fuel system on the engine run stand, running over to here, so I'm outside of the garage. And then I have a connector that plugs into the injectors. Let me show you that. And then when I press the button, and then I go one by one just to make sure they're all clear. But they were all clear with the gum out, with this tester thing here. You gotta be careful because with all the pressure, it'll shoot your injector off if you're not holding it tightly. So I'm going down each injector, just checking the spray pattern, making sure they all spray. So I've got one more to do here on the end. Plug my connector in. Hold it up, and then I hit my button. It's just a battery with a fuse here, and then a push button. Make sure none of the jets are clogged. So all 4 of these on this side are working now. All 4 were already tested before I started the video. So now this is going to go back onto my intake, which is right there. And then now it's going to be bolted onto the engine. But this is how I test my injectors, because you don't want to burn up a cylinder because one injector was plugged. So remember, I already tested the fuel pressure. So now I just have the fuel pump hooked to this battery, and you can hear it running. Well, this is on the CUDA, so that's the 2010 5.7 Hemi, and this is my usual setup. Comes in on the side, goes across, comes down, regulator is set for the pressure, and then there's also a return on the bottom of the regulator. So that's what's going on with this one. That's why I have the spare fuel rail that doesn't fit on there. So this was the early non-Eagle 5.7. So now we need to figure out what else to do. So I've got another set of rails, but somehow I cut this off so I could use the, you know, the fitting off of it. So I need to find the other half of that rail, this partner, because that has the inlet fitting on it. And this one's fairly clean compared to the black ones that I showed you earlier. And I also have this set aftermarket rails. They clamp down with, you know, these little clamp deals that would go in the normal spots, you know, like that. But I don't have all the fittings to to make the hoses up because I wasn't planning on using these. So now it's almost like I need 3 more of these fittings so I can run it through, put one on this end, loop it, put one on the other end, and I could probably just get a gauge or a block off plug just for this end. That way it's a feed through system and nothing's sticking up. So I have to figure out what else to do, what I need to buy now, because I don't have any number 8 hose, Teflon hose and ends, besides my regular old braided stuff. All the stuff I was buying lately was number 6, because I thought I was done with this fuel system unless I can find this other half and then clean that out. The AutoZone and O'Reilly's sell this plastic replacement fuel line. It's like a heat shrink. So I'll figure out what to do. Need to get this thing, fuel system, hooked up so I can mount that intake and get this thing running. It's just the wiring's just about done. I just want to hear this thing run. All right, let's see what's going on. All right, next. Putting this fuel rail on my manifold because the other ones seem to be so dirty. So I had to go back on eBay and order some more Fagola 45s. So now I'm making up this fuel line here just so I can reach that mounted regulator filter. So that's why I realized I want 45s on here and not 90s. So I'm making this fuel line here. It looks like it'll be a perfect angle. Remember, you have to have something flexible, so I'll put a little bit flexible hose there, PTFE hose. And it looks like that might be the right angle there. I'll leave a little bit of slack in between, or maybe even loop it down a little bit, you know, like this, just so there's some flexibility. But now the angle keeps it from hitting the firewall. And then over here, I've got a 90 going up over the other side, and I'm gonna either put a plug and gauge on the other end of that other fuel rail. So now this is kind of what they call a deadhead system, where the fuel return doesn't go back with the orifice at the other end causing the back pressure. The back pressure comes from the fuel filter regulator there, and then it goes in, and then this is all the same pressure now, 58 to 60, and then it's plugged at the end, which is different from my other system where I always have a regulator at the far end, and this is coming in at full pressure here, and the regulator is controlling how this pressure here is ending up at the 5860. So let's get this other fitting, my other 90 on the end of that hose, and the plug at the other end so I can finally get this all tested with the regulator. All right, here's my fuel system. This is it. This is going to be swapped out for a cap. This is just a female to female with a cap, a plug on the end. Just going to put a cap as soon as I order one. But all the fittings I got off of eBay. There's the Corvette filter regulator, and then I have it looping around. I had to leave a little bit of slack in there because the engine has to be able to move without pulling on the fuel line. Then it comes over this way, put a 90 on there, PTFE hose to 90 on this side, and then this side rail with all the injectors on it. So I've got my my fuel gauge. I already turned on the fuel pump to flush this line out here before I hooked it onto here, and then I plugged it in. and then flushed it all the way to this end before I put a plug on it. So now I'm gonna put this in line here so I can check the pressure. But this is how I want it hooked up. It will not have a gauge on it because I want this, you know, as tight as possible here, since it's going to be going underneath the front cover if I have the cover on it. So this could stick out here a little bit if I do leave the gauge on it, because these are cheap, very cheap. So let's put this on here and test the pressure and take it back off for now. Okay, the gauge is plumbed in. Let me hit my switch. And also checking for leaks, because now this is finally all plugged up and under pressure. So I have to leave it on for a little while and check for leaks. So here goes this. There it goes. It's upside down. It's up close to 60. Checking everything for leaks. Staying right close to 60 there. And nothing seems to be leaking, so I think we're almost ready to start this thing up. So the return line seems to be working. Pressure is all applied. If you can hear that pump, I don't know if you can hear it from me being up here, but it's on the frame rail by the right rear tire, so I can hear it now, but normally you don't hear it when the engine's running. All right, let's see what's next. Start plugging everything in, bolting the manifold down, checking all the O-rings. All right, let's go. You know, while I'm standing here, I also forgot to talk about these extra wires up here to allow the exhaust to go back into the intake. So these are all extra wires I can use for anything I need to control, because they're all the way up here by the front of the engine. This one's for the air intake temperature. So this would go in the whatever I have hooked up for the air cleaner. That's going to go in there to tell the engine how cold the temperature of the air is coming in, so it could adjust the computer settings. But I just saw this. I never cut it out yet, but it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra wires. I haven't ohmed them out yet to see where they go, but they're all on the wiring chart. Just saying, before you start cutting everything out that you don't need, look to see what you can use, especially the front of the engine up here. You know, you could use it for fan control or any other, you know, lights, relay controls, anything else you might need without having to run any extra wires up here from inside. These come from inside the car now. Just something to keep in mind. These older 5.7s had this EGR valve on the front of one of the heads on the head on the passenger side. This was bolted to the front of it, and I made a block off plate that kind of looked like that, so that we're no longer using that. And I've got all these wires pulled back. Like I said before, you don't want to have any wiring hanging out there not being used or not terminated, because it'll act like an antenna and take it right back to your CPU, okay? And then I had 2 wires here that were usable, okay? So these are the 3 I cut out. But then these 2, this blue and this blue with a green tracer, I pulled those back. I pulled one of them back, you know, like I was talking about before. And then The other wire I'm going to leave up front here. This is what I'm doing today. Took a razor blade and cut out a section of my carpet. Carpet's cheap, and I need to find space for this PCM. So I realized it would not fit underneath the console with all this extra padding from the carpet and this extra insulation I put on top of the floor. So I cut out this piece, and now the PCM can sit underneath the console because of all the stuffing I cut out. And I'm going to trim that also. And if I just cut a notch at the front of the console here on top, you know, just enough for the wires to go through, I'll still have the support of the corners, and this won't be visible. But that's what I'm doing. Since I took off about an inch of height here, the console will cover this up. So let me chop out the front of my console and see how it sits on here. But before, it was just way too high where the console was sitting up and the edges weren't touching the carpet. But it gets to about here and over here, so it'll be well hidden. And it, like I said, it's in the car with me, so it's not out in the heat of the engine. I was able to hide the PCM underneath the console, and it fits. But I had to cut the front of the console off here just so I can get these wires to come out. The cable for the orange connector and the PC100 connector. So these are going to be all the ground wires hidden underneath the console, going to ground. And then I labeled all of my wires coming out so I know where they go, so I can hook them up and then hide them. That's how it is. I got the PCM to fit underneath the console here in the front of it, because the green connector was like over this side underneath this section here. That's why it fits, because then my other three connectors go on this front here, and the box is sticking out maybe a 1/4 inch out of the front, but we won't be able to see it. Plus, once I get all this wired up, I can, you know, make a patch or something that's velcro down just to hide any wires that might be showing, because this is the piece I cut out to sink the PCM down into the insulation in the carpet. You can see it fits very nicely under there. It won't be visible, and the console is sitting where I had it before, where this screw here goes onto the bracket in the same hole. Let me pull this off so you can see. I had to flip the computer around so that the transmission connector was on the rear. So if I pull this up, I'll show you that. Get that out of there. I had to heat the sides up a little bit too, just to widen them. And this is just the tan console that came with this tan interior that was in this car. Because like I said before, this was a gold 71 Challenger convertible that I made into a pace car. So this was just a console, because I think I have 4 or 5 spare consoles. This was just one I painted black that came with this car. You can see the hole I had to cut out. I had to notch this. I had to notch that. Had to push out the sides a little bit with a heat gun. This side too. And you can see the color of the original interior of this car. And there is the PCM. I had to flip this around because this connector here is now underneath this portion here where it's raised. That's why it fits, because all these are up toward the front where this big indentation is. underneath here. So that's why it fits. So I could still have the carpet up a little bit if I need it to sit a little lower, but it fits just right. But that's how it would fit, just like that. I had it before, and it's even lower. So this clears plenty, and that fits through the hole in the front. But you can see I had to take quite a bit of the insulation out of the carpet to push that down. But it fits nicely underneath there and is well hidden. And I can get to it with just pulling a few screws to remove the console and get to everything under there. I can even have a, anti-theft switch. All right, so let's get all this wiring cleaned up. Still need to get this thing started. Hooked up my battery. Got my wire inside. Now hooked to that fuel pump trigger. Got just this wrapped up temporarily because I'm going to get some sheathing. That red wire is only powering my fuel pump relay and fuel pump. And it comes from over there. So right now this is all tied up. I turned on the key to verify my switch 12 volts was getting power and my new relay was hooked up. And it flushed out my fuel line going to the intake. So next, before I fire this guy up, gonna modify this tube like I did my other one. I slice this off here around, and then I rotate this fitting to where I need it going to wherever my reservoir is going to be, which will probably be back here where the relay pack is. I'm going to move that. This is just for my headlights. This can go anywhere that doesn't get wet because it's 2 circuit breakers, 2 small 5-amp fuses that power the relays. And this is all triggered by the positive side of the headlight wire that goes to the headlights. So now instead of going through this little wire coming from the headlight switch, all it does now is trigger the relay. The relay is getting its power right from the battery terminal. So now we're going to move this. We're going to build a little clamp or bracket like my other one that held my starter relay and it held the power steering reservoir here. And then I'm going to redirect this hose by rotating this a little bit and then retacking the bracket that holds it down with the O-ring inside at the proper angle. So I'm still just using the same piece with the same, I think this is 3/4 inch hose, and just rotating this around. But I can't start up until I get this hooked up. I've got a wire already made, a hose already made up for the Borgeson. And I wanted to show this also. The Borgeson box and all the other 2 other power steering boxes that I've tried, and this including the stock one, was real close to the exhaust manifold here. So this is the one with the most clearance, but could not use the TTI header. I'm going to get underneath this thing and I'm going to show what I made. By using the TTI motor mount, I needed a little bit extra clearance, so I didn't want it to touch. So what I did was I made my own mount. I took a flat piece of rectangular sheet metal or metal here and drilled the 4 holes, and then I just made a bracket that went to the motor mount with the same hole as a TTI mount to bolt onto the motor mount. But now this is all pushed back a little bit this way, and it's about 1/2 inch higher than the TTI mount. That way I have more room over there for my AC compressor. But now this mount is holding the engine up just a little bit higher on this side. It shouldn't affect the angle much, but I always check that anyway, so then I can always you know, adjust back there with shims or something if the angle changes much, but it's not going to change much. This is a Schumacher mount here. It's the one with the internal capture bracket, so it can't pull apart. And if I had to remake this or make another one, this part here, I would angle it towards the engine a little bit and then back down this way, because then that's extra support. Because right now this is straight down. Hope you can see that. Sun is really bright out here in the garage, but I'm in the shadow here, so not sure how this is going to turn out. But this part here is straight up and down, and that gives me a lot of clearance in here to get to that nut. I can still get in here with a box end. I think it's a 3/4 inch box end wrench to get that nut, and then still tighten that nut on the motor mount. So what I'm going to do, if I ever make another one or I want to modify this one and keep it on my engine stand or something, I'll just weld the bracket in at an angle so it can be close to the block. And then down here it's going to come in maybe a 45 here. That way it gives me more room, because there's all kinds of room here to make this mount a little bit longer and then still hug the block, and then still come over to this plate, or the plate could even be longer. The plate could come down farther and then come over like this. So just in case you guys you know, want to make your own mount, I have the TTI mount in the box now, and mine's more hardy. As I can show you the original mount. What they give you here. See, this is all they give you here. One of them, I think, is the AC compressor, old AC compressor bolt hole, and then these two bolt onto the two of the four that my new mount is using. So your motor mount just has to bolt in there, and they give you a tight space there to get to that nut. So I'm saying you can probably make this even go farther down this way and then over. Since I have my mock-up block here, my 6.1, I can make more, you know, do my motor mounts and test them. This one just has a solid. But enough talking. Got to get to work and move this modified hose mount. All right, let's get to it. Okay, I'm showing how I'm carefully cutting this round because I'm going to rotate this mount after I get the angle correct and then tack it back on like I did on the Cuda. There are other ways to get this cut, just like this. I have this round, it's this 3/4 inch, it says 1 inch. I have this 1 inch hole saw, and I could take this like this and cut it, but I don't have much control because these are really coarse teeth on here, and I don't want to risk hitting the O-ring sealing surface here. So this would be very aggressive and it might mess it up. So I'm just doing it this nice slow way like I did my other one, cutting that with the Dremel tool. Doesn't have to be perfectly round because I can file that, but it's just going to be tacked on, so any gap, if there is any, is going to be filled with weld anyway. Okay. As I'm looking at this, I also realized once you cut that off, you can make a little fork bracket for it, like I did with my, here's on the intake. I made that bracket with a grinder and a piece of steel and a drill. Just drill a little hole, make a fork. That way you're not fixed on rotating this. You can make a fork bracket that just holds down the slip, and then it'll be adjustable whenever you need it to adjust. Remember that O-ring is in there holding it. So you can do it my way. Either weld that in at your fixed angle, wherever your pump is, or you can make a fork bracket just to hold down the edges here, and it's captured and tightened by that screw, by that bolt. Okay, another ideas for you guys that are fabricating. I guess no one really realizes how long it takes to fabricate stuff when you just have to stare at something and make it work. But after I showed everything fitting underneath the console, I'm finalizing the wiring here. This is how this ended up. Let me get a light on it. It's not all taped up yet, but this is how it ended up. See, this is for my cigarette lighter power cords back there. This is how it ended up, so it fits underneath the console. I labeled with a label maker where all my wires go, in case I need spare wires. That way I don't have to guess and get the meter out every time I want to hook something up. EGR pin 1, EGR pin 6, going through the wiring harness. That way I don't have to run the spare. But this is how it's going to end up. These wires, some of these are spare. I narrowed it down to one relay like I was talking about with a fuse in it, and got rid of the dual relays, because remember I said I have a fuel pump relay and only need an ASD relay now. The fuel pump relay is out on the firewall, but this is going to be hidden underneath the console. This is now just the ASD relay, and everything works when it's powered up. And this is my ODB2 connector. Probably going to shorten that up once I decide where I'm going to mount it. Thinking of just a bracket that's kind of hidden up underneath here or on the driver's side, like the modern cars. But not many other, the switched wire and the hot wire. So all this is hidden underneath the console, and all this is going to be taped up once I get some sheathing from eBay or, you know, AutoZone, maybe if I use the hard stuff. But this is just going to be all wrapped That's what I ended up with. Once I get it running, if I ever find time, I can go in and shorten every one of these wires up. But there's not much there that needs to be shortened. But if you want to make it look neat, the wires come in from there and they can go directly into the plugs. This is the orange plug where that's the perfect length. It's just my other wires here. You know, if I wanted to make that, at least that's removable and I can redo those if I ever have to make it look neater. But you know how it goes. If you don't do it now, you'll never find time to do it again because there's so many other things going on. But that's how everything fits under the console, how I showed the console on top of it and it's hidden. Everything comes out of the back, and then I'm gonna hide that with a piece of carpet. This intake is bolted down, and now I am making the wiring harness that I talked about in the other vid for the horn, the washer bottle. It's gonna have the water temp wire and the oil pressure wire for the rally gauges. So what I wanted to show, I've got the other connector over there. I wanted to show how to pull because I'm using the oil pressure. This is the water temp wire on an E-body, 71 E-body. It was this one back here. I'm pulling the water temp wire to reuse that. And I made a new wire. Made a new long wire because it's going to go down to the oil pressure setting unit. You know, the big one for the rally gauge. I wanted to show how to pull these out of here. In case you ever have to replace these or move them. These are all locked in. Let's see if I can hold this camera up with something while I show how to pull this. Pull these pins out of here. Too much movement here. Okay, let's see if you can see this. If you just take a screwdriver and let me show the pin that's already out. Okay, so this one's already out. If you look at this little part here, the short end, you can see the way the angle of this clip, this male spade is going down. So this is the release part. You have to push on the short end and then pull it. So as you're pushing this part in, it's releasing the catch that's holding it in, and then you can push this down once that is released from the capture plastic. So this is the water temp wire. It's nice and long and it still has the end on it. So I'm going to use that in the new harness the new connector I'm putting all these wires into, but I wanted to show how to remove these. Okay, let's see if I can get this to stay up here. Okay, so you look to see, let's see if I can position this so you guys can see. Okay, like I showed, the angle, if you look at that, try to zoom that in there. Okay, the way this angles in, it's telling me that this end is the short end, okay? This is the end you would push in, and then after you push that in, this would push down and eject. So I'm going to pull the water temperature wire out. Wow. Okay, here we go. So if I look at the water temp wire, It's the short end, and it's this lower left pin. So I'm gonna push this in like this. And as I'm pushing in, I can either pull the other end out or push down on this, like this. Okay, so now when I flip it over, this purple wire, if I can just keep you guys in the field here. Okay, so that's how to remove this type of connector. See, I'm going to take some contact cleaner and a little bit of a, you can use a brass brush or a little bit of sandpaper. Got to clean that up so you get a good connection, but now I can reuse this wire. Reuse this whole wire. I know you guys can't see that. There it is. Let me zoom out. So now there's my whole wire. I'm going to put in the other connector along with the new wire I just soldered together with a new terminal, so that I'm not sure of the length yet, but it has to go down past the alternator to the big rally cluster or sending unit, which is the little round, the round one about that tall. All right, so let's get these two wires in the connector and tape it up. All right, this is the old connector, this is the new connector, and to install these ends, see on this one I even wrote down what each one goes to, because this is going to be my Hemi swapped 71 Challenger, so I want to know where everything goes. These aren't really visible from the top, so it's easy to work on when you know what everything goes to. So the tack, washer bottle, alternator, hot wire, oil pressure sending unit, horns, run wire, that's hot when the key's on, start, that's hot when you're in the start position, and the temperature sending unit, which is where this wire is going. So with the connector I just pulled out, see I shined it up with a little sandpaper, made it nice and shiny. You take a screwdriver and you spread that out a little bit, because it's going to have to lock in there with a little tooth. So I'm just going to stick it back in the hole. Okay, let me get it so you guys can see. Stick it back in the hole. If you had two hands, it'd be a lot easier. And then I push it in till it clicks. Sorry, you guys can't see that. Push it in till it clicks. Or you push it in with a screwdriver. And then there, it's all the way back in there now. So that's how you work on these terminals. If you find old ones and you want to clean them up, you can take out all your wires. And these sell for some good money if you have an original one that isn't, where these locks aren't broken off. Because I know I had friends selling these before. But I always have extra wiring harnesses from cars I've parted out, so I've never needed one. Just let you know how you can put your terminals back together. So I've got a tack wire here. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the tack driver that hangs off of one of the coils inside the car with me, or if it's going to be outside, like on the firewall. It's this little multiplier. It takes one signal off one of the coils, and you can set it to multiply by 8, and then I should just hook it to this wire and leave it on the firewall, because this goes right inside to my tack from the car when I had the other engine in it. So everything was working as it should. That's why I'm just not pulling all the wires out out of this good harness, and just using a spare one I had that only had 2 wires coming out of it, so I can put the long wires in it and not really tear one up, because this one's still original to a small block Challenger. All right, here's my wiring harness. It's the front horn and washer harness, but also have the ignition. So it's all taped up. This is where I showed it before when I was showing the one the old one. What I did was I've got a run wire in here that's 12 volts when it's running, which used to be the blue wire from the ignition switch. This is all wrapped up because I'm getting one of those tack adapters I've used in the CUDA. It's an 1-to-8 multiplier box. It was $60 on eBay. And so I left extra wire because I'm not sure where I'm going to put it yet. This black wire is going to the circuit breaker that comes from the alternator. That's another alternate feed going into the car. It used to go to the amp meter. So this is also supplying some of the instruments and accessories inside the car. So this is for the tack. It's going to the tack adapter. So this is the power and the tack, and then the alternator wire. So then I have this going all the way up to the front. This is the water temp wire, which is going to go on to the water temperature sensor. And I left a long wire that's going to go down to the 45-degree oil filter adapter to reach the pressure sensor for the rally cluster. So this is the wiring harness, almost ready to go in once I just ordered the tack adapter on eBay. So it won't be here till Tuesday next week. But just wanted to give you guys an update. This video is probably going to be very long because I've been working on this. So I've got a bunch of videos I'm going to try to piece together. So if this video you guys are watching is very long, just jump ahead, because there's a bunch of pieces I've got to throw together for this video.